The CEO waved his hand at me like I was a mosquito interrupting his celebration. "Claire, you're being paranoid. This deal is done. Go home and get some sleep." It was 11:47 p.m., 12 hours before the merger announcement that would either make or break Vanguard Financial Group. I had just shown him documentation proving the $7 billion deal was built on falsified numbers, and he dismissed me without even reading a single page. My name is Claire Mitchell, and I've spent 15 years in compliance and due diligence, long enough to know the difference between caution and catastrophe. That night, standing in the CEO's office while he laughed at my concerns, I knew exactly what was coming. By the time the market opened the next morning, the merger had unraveled completely, and the man who waved me away was watching his career burn in real time. Before I show you how it all fell apart in less than 12 hours, I need to pause for just a moment. If you've ever been ignored when you were trying to prevent a disaster, if you've ever watched someone's arrogance destroy everything they built, this story is going to resonate deeply. What happens next moves fast, and it's intense. Hit that subscribe button right now, because you're about to see what happens when ego meets reality at the worst possible moment. Now let's go back to the beginning, to the weeks of sleepless nights that led to that dismissive wave. 6 weeks before the merger collapsed, I was sitting in a conference room at Vanguard's Manhattan headquarters, reviewing the preliminary due diligence on Horizon Capital Partners. Vanguard was a mid-sized investment firm with $180 billion in assets under management. Horizon was smaller but growing fast, managing about $90 billion across private equity and venture capital. The acquisition made strategic sense on paper. Combined, we'd have nearly $270 billion in AUM, expanded geographic reach, and complementary client bases. The CEO, Richard Townsend, had spent 18 months courting Horizon's leadership, and the deal was his obsession, his legacy project. I was 38 years old, director of compliance and risk assessment, and I had built my reputation on finding problems before they became disasters. My team of 7 analysts worked around the clock reviewing contracts, financial statements, regulatory filings, and operational structures. Due diligence isn't glamorous. It's tedious, detail-oriented work that most people avoid, but it's essential. "Claire, what's your initial read?" Richard had asked me during our first meeting about Horizon. "Too early to say. We need full access to their records before I can give you anything meaningful." He had smiled, confident. "You'll have everything you need. I want this clean." That was 6 weeks ago. Now, with days until the planned announcement, nothing felt clean. The first red flag appeared in week 3. One of my analysts, a sharp 26-year-old named Maya Patel, brought me a spreadsheet comparison. "Claire, look at this. Horizon's Q2 revenue doesn't match across documents. Their investor deck shows $340 million, but their internal management reports show $287 million. I leaned closer. That's a significant discrepancy. And it's not the only one. Q3 and Q4 have similar gaps. I spent the next week digging deeper. The more we looked, the worse it got. Revenue figures that shifted between documents, client retention rates that appeared inflated, operational costs that seemed suspiciously low. I scheduled a call with Horizon's CFO, Patricia Ward. "Patricia, we're seeing some inconsistencies in your financial reporting. Can you help us reconcile these numbers?" There was a pause. "What inconsistencies?" I walked her through 3 specific examples. Her explanations were vague, defensive, and ultimately unconvincing. These are different reporting standards for different audiences. Nothing unusual. "Patricia, we're past the point of different reporting standards. These are material discrepancies that need documentation. I'll have my team send over clarifications." The clarifications never came. By week 5, I had compiled a list of 23 red flags: missing litigation disclosures, offshore accounts that didn't appear on any balance sheet, vendor contracts that seemed designed to hide related party transactions, and worst of all, evidence that Horizon had been inflating their assets under management by counting the same funds multiple times across different structures. I brought this to Richard on a Monday morning, 3 weeks before the planned announcement. "Richard, we have a problem." He looked up from his computer, already annoyed. "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could expose us to massive liability. Horizon's numbers don't hold up under scrutiny. I think they've been systematically misrepresenting their financial position." His expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation, Claire. It's a serious finding. I have documentation." "Send it to me. I'll review it with legal." I sent everything that afternoon: detailed analysis, supporting documents, specific recommendations recommendations to delay the announcement until we could verify the discrepancies. Richard never responded. 2 days later, I tried again. Email, phone call, nothing. Maya stopped by my office. Claire, are they ignoring this? It appears so. That's insane. These findings are material. We can't close this deal without resolving them. I knew she was right, but I also knew Richard. He had staked his entire reputation on this merger. He had promised the board, the investors, the media, that this would be his defining achievement. And I was the person standing in the way of that story. With 1 week until the announcement, I requested a formal meeting with Richard and our general counsel, Edward Liu. They agreed to meet on Wednesday afternoon. I presented everything methodically: the revenue discrepancies, the hidden liabilities, the inflated AUM figures, the missing litigation disclosures. Edward took notes, his face growing more concerned with each slide. Richard sat back in his chair, arms crossed. Claire, do you have proof that any of this is fraudulent? I have proof that it's inconsistent and undisclosed. Whether it's fraudulent is a question for regulators, but we'd be liable for proceeding without verification. How long would verification take? At minimum, 60 days, probably 90. Richard shook his head. Unacceptable. We announce in 7 days. Then we need to delay the announcement. We're not delaying anything. This deal has been in motion for 18 months. We have investor commitments. We have media scheduled. We have integration teams ready to execute. I'm not blowing all of that up because you're seeing shadows. I kept my voice level. These aren't shadows. These are documented discrepancies in material financial information, which Horizon will clarify before closing. We'll make it a condition of the final agreement, Edward interjected carefully. Richard, Claire's concerns do carry significant legal risk. If we proceed and these issues surface post-merger, they won't surface, Richard interrupted, because they're accounting variances, not fraud. Claire, I appreciate your diligence, but you're being overly cautious. That's your job. I get it. But my job is to make strategic decisions, and I'm deciding to move forward. I looked at Edward. He avoided my eyes. I need you to sign off on this, Richard continued. Compliance review complete? That's what the board needs to see. I can't sign off on findings I haven't verified. His jaw tightened. Then verify them in the next 7 days. That's not possible. Then we have a problem, Claire. The meeting ended. I walked back to my office, hands shaking with frustration and fear. Richard was going to push this through regardless of the risks, and if I stood in his way, I'd be the problem to eliminate. That week was the longest of my career. My team worked 18-hour days trying to verify what we could, but Horizon had stopped cooperating entirely. Requests for documentation went unanswered. Calls weren't returned. It was clear they knew we were asking uncomfortable questions and had decided to wait us out until the announcement made the deal irreversible. By Sunday night, 48 hours before the scheduled Tuesday morning announcement, I had exhausted every avenue. The red flags remained unresolved, the discrepancies remained unexplained, and Richard remained committed to moving forward. At 9 p.m. Sunday, I received an email from Richard's assistant. The CEO requests your presence at his office at 11 p.m. tonight to finalize compliance documentation. I drove back to Manhattan, the city lights blurring past my window. I knew what this meeting would be. One final push to get me to sign off. One final chance for him to make my concerns disappear. Richard was alone in his corner office when I arrived, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, looking like a man preparing for battle. Claire, sit. I sat, setting my laptop bag beside me. I need your compliance certification by midnight, he said without preamble. The press release goes out at 6 a.m. Board approves final terms at 8 a.m. Announcement hits the wires at market open. Richard, I can't certify compliance when we have 23 unresolved findings. You can, and you will. Or I'll find someone who understands the bigger picture here. I opened my laptop and pulled up the summary document. Look at this. Really look at it. Horizon has been misrepresenting their assets by at least $8 billion. They have undisclosed litigation that could result in hundreds of millions in liability. Their revenue recognition practices are questionable at best, fraudulent at worst. If we close this deal and any of this surfaces, we're looking at shareholder lawsuits, regulatory sanctions, and reputational damage that could destroy Vanguard. Richard barely glanced at the screen. Then he waved his hand dismissively. the gesture I'll never forget. Claire, you're being paranoid. This deal is done. Go home and get some sleep. I'm not being paranoid. I'm doing my job. Your job is to support strategic objectives, not obstruct them. I stood up slowly. My job is to protect this company from liability. And I'm telling you, this merger is a liability bomb waiting to explode. Then I'll take that risk, he said. Now, are you signing off or not? I looked at him for a long moment, at the arrogance in his eyes, at the certainty that he knew better than the person who'd spent 6 weeks examining every detail of this deal. No, I said. I'm not signing off. His expression darkened. Then you're making a career-limiting decision, Claire. Maybe, but I'm making the right one. I walked out of his office at 11:47 p.m., knowing I had just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. If you've ever stood your ground when everyone was telling you to back down, drop the word integrity in the comments. Let me know you understand what it costs to do the right thing. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now, because what happens next is going to blow your mind. I drove home in silence, my mind racing. Richard was going to move forward without my sign-off. He'd probably fabricate some version of compliance approval or simply proceed without it, counting on momentum and excitement to carry the announcement through. When I got home at 12:45 a.m., I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and began drafting a formal email. Clear, detailed, documented. Subject: urgent. Material risk concerns regarding Horizon Capital merger. I addressed it to Richard, the full board of directors, Edward Liu, and our external legal counsel at Morrison & Drake. I outlined every finding, every discrepancy, every unanswered question. I attached supporting documentation. I made specific recommendations. Suspend the announcement. Conduct extended due diligence. Engage forensic accountants. Verify all financial representations independently. At 2:17 a.m., I hit send. Then I sat back and waited. By 5 a.m., I had received 0 responses. Not one board member, not Edward, not Richard. Silence. At 5:45 a.m., I checked the news wires. Nothing yet. At 6:03 a.m., the press release hit. Vanguard Financial Group to acquire Horizon Capital Partners in $4.7 billion merger, creating premier global investment platform. I read the headline 3 times, feeling the weight of inevitability settle over me. Richard had done it. Against every warning, against all the evidence, against basic common sense, he had announced the deal. I poured coffee and turned on CNBC. The announcement was the lead story. Breaking news in the financial sector this morning. My phone started ringing. Maya, then other team members. Claire, did you see? They announced it. I saw. But we didn't sign off. How can they did it anyway. By 7 a.m., I was back at my laptop monitoring the news coverage. Financial journalists were praising the strategic vision and bold move. Analysts were projecting synergies. Investors were reacting positively in pre-market trading. And then, at 7:14 a.m., the first crack appeared. A tweet from Jake Morrison, a well-known financial investigative journalist. Interesting timing on the Vanguard Horizon deal. Hearing whispers about due diligence concerns that were raised internally but ignored. Looking into this. My heart rate spiked. Someone had leaked. At 7:22 a.m., another journalist, Sarah Chen from the Financial Chronicle, posted, "Sources indicate Vanguard's compliance team flagged significant discrepancies in Horizon's financial disclosures. Question: why announce before resolving?" The narrative was shifting in real time. At 7:31 a.m., my phone rang. Richard. I didn't answer. He called again. Then Edward called. I let them all go to voicemail. At 7:45 a.m., Horizon Capital issued an unexpected statement. Horizon Capital Partners categorically denies recent unfounded allegations regarding its financial reporting. We are not in active discussions to be acquired and condemn the spread of material disinformation. I read that statement 3 times, my hands going cold. They were denying the deal. Publicly, an hour after Vanguard had announced it. At 7:52 a.m., Richard called again. This time, I answered. "Claire, what the hell did you do?" His voice was shaking with rage. "I did my job. I documented my concerns and reported them appropriately. You leaked to the press." "I did no such thing, but other people saw my email. Other people have concerns. And now everyone's asking questions you can't answer. This is sabotage." "No, Richard. This is consequences. I told you this deal was toxic. You ignored me. Now it's unraveling in public, and you have no one to blame but yourself." I hung up. By 8 a.m., the situation had deteriorated into full crisis. External counsel was demanding emergency calls. Board members were flooding Richard's phone, and Horizon's public denial had created a massive credibility problem. At 8:15 a.m., Edward called me. "Claire, we need you in the office. Now, the board is convening an emergency session." Am I still employed? A pause. "Yes, please come in." At 8:30 a.m., moments before the market opened, I was sitting in a conference room with the full board, Richard, Edward, and our external auditors on video conference. Richard looked like he hadn't slept. His tie was crooked, his face pale. The board chair, Margaret Holloway, addressed the room. "We have approximately 10 minutes before trading begins on what appears to be a catastrophically mismanaged announcement. I need clarity immediately. Claire, please present your findings." I walked them through everything. Richard tried to interrupt twice. Margaret silenced him both times. When I finished, Margaret turned to the external auditors. "Can you verify these concerns?" The lead auditor nodded grimly. "We received Dr. Mitchell's documentation at 2 a.m. We've conducted preliminary review. Her findings appear accurate. We would have recommended against proceeding with this transaction without significant additional verification." Margaret looked at Richard. "You were aware of these concerns?" "They're speculative," he said weakly. "They're documented," I corrected. At 8:47 a.m., with 13 minutes until market open, Margaret made a decision. "We're pulling the merger. Issue an immediate statement. Blame scheduling conflicts, due diligence timeline, whatever sounds least damaging. But we are not proceeding." Richard's face went white. "You can't." "We already have. This meeting is adjourned." The statement went out at 8:54 a.m. Vanguard Financial Group and Horizon Capital Partners have mutually agreed to suspend merger discussions to allow for extended due diligence review. At 9:30 a.m., the market opened. Vanguard stock dropped 42% in the first 10 minutes of trading. Okay, we're in the final stretch. Everything is collapsing in real time. If you're glued to this story, if you need to see how this ends, make sure you're subscribed because the conclusion is going to be incredibly satisfying. Let's finish this. The trading floor descended into chaos. Circuit breakers triggered twice in the first hour as sell orders overwhelmed the system. By noon, Vanguard had lost $7.3 billion in market capitalization. Investor confidence had evaporated. I sat in my office, watching the carnage unfold on multiple screens, feeling neither vindicated nor triumphant. Just exhausted. Richard had stopped answering calls by 11 a.m. The board had placed him on immediate administrative leave by 1 p.m. By 3 p.m., regulatory agencies had opened inquiries. The media narrative shifted completely. By evening, headlines read, "Vanguard CEO ignored compliance warnings, triggering merger collapse and shareholder crisis." Jake Morrison published a detailed investigation by 5 p.m. Sources inside Vanguard, how one executive's arrogance nearly destroyed a $180 billion firm. The article quoted anonymous sources, my team I suspected, describing Richard's dismissive wave, his refusal to review documentation, his determination to proceed despite clear warnings. Wednesday morning, I was called to an emergency board meeting. Margaret and 4 other directors were present. Richard was not. "Claire," Margaret began. "First, on behalf of this board, I owe you an apology. You performed your duties with integrity and professionalism, and we failed to support you when it mattered most." I nodded, accepting but not dismissing the acknowledgement. "Second, we've conducted a review of what happened." Richard proceeded with the announcement without proper authorization, falsely implied compliance approval that you never gave, and ignored material risk warnings from multiple sources. He's been terminated for cause, effective immediately. She slid a folder across the table. "We'd like to offer you a new position. Chief Risk Officer. Reporting directly to this board. You'll have veto authority over any transaction you believe carries unacceptable risk. Full autonomy, significant compensation package, and a seat in every strategic discussion going forward." I opened the folder, scanning the terms. It was more than fair. It was a complete restructuring of governance. "I'll accept," I said, "with one non-negotiable condition. Name it. No one on my team, no one in compliance, no one performing oversight duties will ever be retaliated against, dismissed, or silenced for raising legitimate concerns. If we're rebuilding this company's culture, it starts with protecting the people brave enough to tell the truth." Margaret smiled. Agreed, unanimously. Over the next 3 months, we rebuilt. New CEO, new governance protocols, new transparency standards, external forensic review of all pending transactions. The investigation into Horizon revealed everything I had suspected and worse. Systematic fraud, inflated valuations, hidden liabilities totaling over $2 billion. Their CEO and CFO were eventually indicted. If Vanguard had closed that deal, it would have destroyed us. Richard Townsend never worked in finance again. His reputation was ruined, not because of the failed merger, but because of how he failed, ignoring warnings, dismissing expertise, prioritizing ego over prudence. 6 months after that night in his office, a Wall Street Journal profile on corporate governance featured Vanguard as a case study in crisis management. The article included a quote from Margaret. "We learned that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about listening to the people who do. Claire Mitchell saved this company because she refused to be silent. We're better because she was brave." I framed that article and hung it in my new office, the corner office that used to be Richard's. One evening, Maya stopped by as I was reviewing a new acquisition proposal. "Claire, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That night, when Richard waved you away, did you know what was going to happen?" I thought about that for a moment. I knew what could happen. I knew the risks were real. But I also knew that once I sent that email, I couldn't control the outcome. I could only control whether I did the right thing. And it cost you everything temporarily. It did. But doing the wrong thing would have cost me something I couldn't get back, my integrity. And that's not for sale. She nodded and left. I turned back to the proposal, red pen in hand, ready to ask the uncomfortable questions that no one else wanted to ask. Because that's the job. Not making deals happen, making sure the right deals happen for the right reasons. The CEO waved me away at 11:47 p.m., convinced he knew better. By 9:30 a.m., his career was over. By noon, the company he almost destroyed was saved, and the person he dismissed was sitting in his office, making sure it never happened again. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever been waved away, dismissed, told you were overthinking, only to watch exactly what you predicted come true? Tell me your story in the comments. I want to hear it. And if this story showed you that doing the right thing, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it in the end, subscribe to this channel. We're telling stories about people who refused to compromise, who stood firm when everyone told them to back down. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching until the end. And remember, when someone waves you away without listening, that says everything about them and nothing about you. I'll see you in the next one.